But whoever put the chapters into the Gospel of John either did not have an understanding of the spiritual secrets of the text, or they purposely wrote in the chapters to confuse the readers who did not have access to the inner meanings of the text. And welcome back to Jesus is Soul. My name is Shimon Klinger. I'm so happy you're here. Please like, subscribe, hit that notification button as we're trying to spread this wisdom to as many people as we possibly can. Before we begin, I want to remind you what this video series is. On the whole, the goal and aim of this video series is to uncover the secrets that are in the Gospel of John and to bring them to the world. In order to be able to do that, and before we are able to actually analyze the text of the Gospel of John, we first need to establish that foundation. So the last couple of videos, this video, and the next couple of videos are all intended to build that foundation so that we can finally get to analyzing the text. The first video in this series taught that the Gospel of John is not only a coded text, but it is also a Kabbalistic text. In the second video, we looked at our true identity from the perspective of Kabbalah, which simply says that we have a soul and that soul is given to us from God, and as a result, our root is indeed divine. And in the last two videos, we identified the 7 players within the Gospel of John and looked at what they represent spiritually. So with all of that said, this particular video, we're going to look at the actual structure of the text of the Gospel of John and understand that the current chapters as they're written are wrong. So let's get started. Historically, the church has read all of 4 Gospels in really the same way. The church presents the Gospel of John and the 4 synoptic Gospels, the other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, as a historical document. And as a result, because all 4 of the Gospels are a historical record, together they are taken as a complete understanding, or the most complete understanding we have to understand the historical life of Jesus. As a result, each of the Gospels is a piece of an understanding that when taken together, all 4 Gospels give us the story of Jesus. As we look at the Gospel of John in a new and fresh way, we are going to read the Gospel of John from what I term as a closed book. What this simply means is that the Gospel of John should be read as a complete book without drawing from different understandings from either the other 3 Gospels or from the epistles, the letters of Paul, and the books of the New Testament that follow the Gospel of John. Everything that we need in order to understand the secrets of the Gospel of John are found in the Gospel of John. We must understand that the subtle cues of the text provide us with the greatest spiritual secrets. And when we don't understand something, we must scour the book in order to find it and so that it makes sense. There's one exception to this particular rule, and that is simply that the author included Old Testament references. And so therefore, when we come across those Old Testament references, we are going to go to the Old Testament and understand it from a Kabbalistic perspective. Those are hints that the author wrote in to help embellish the particular spiritual concepts that he was writing about. But what we're not going to do is we are not going to reference Matthew, Mark, and Luke to help us understand what's in John. John is a closed book. It is supposed to be understood by itself without reference from the other synoptic Gospels. The other understanding that we must have when we approach the Gospel of John is that the current chapter designations currently confuse the true meaning of the text. Now, I'm not a theologian, and I'm sure that there are some wonderful theologians out there that can explain to us why the church fathers divided up the Gospel of John the way they did. But whoever put the chapters into the Gospel of John either did not have an understanding of the spiritual secrets of the text, or they purposely wrote in the chapters to purposely confuse the readers who did not have access to the inner meanings of the text. The reason why I say this is because if we read the book of John as it was originally written, without the chapters and without the verses numbered, what we find is that the Gospel of John is naturally divided up into different scenes. Often, the scenes will start with a biographical event of Jesus' life. And then the scenes transition into Jesus having either a monologue or a dialogue with other people. Always, the scene concludes with the book telling us that Jesus went from one location to another location. And when this is written into the book, what it indicates is one scene ending and the next scene beginning. Let's look at an example. In the fourth scene of the Gospel of John, we find Jesus entering into the temple and chasing out all the money changers and all of the merchants. Jesus also then talks to some of the Jews about his actions. And then, after this part of it, Jesus has a long conversation with Nicodemus. Nicodemus is designated as a Pharisee, and that will play into the importance of what Jesus is saying. And then in verse 323, we are told a quizzical and seemingly innocuous statement about Jesus' life back then. We are told, and I quote, "After these things, Jesus and his students came into the Judean land, and he stayed there with them and was immersing." I mean, does it really matter to us now what Jesus did after his conversation with Nicodemus? It has no bearing on our lives. So why would the author write this in? However, when we read the Gospel of John without the verses and chapters as they are currently in them right now, this statement concludes the scene that was written. Elsewhere, we can look at a different scene. In the 8th scene of the Gospel of John, Jesus heals a man who couldn't walk. The biographical aspect of this scene occurs between John 5:1 through 5:18. After this particular event, Jesus has an in-depth conversation with the Jews that occurs between the verses of John 5:19 through 5:47. And then we're told another quizzical statement. In this case, the text tells us that after these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee of Tiberias. And that effectively concludes the scene. Across all the scenes that have this particular structure, meaning that there is a biographical event of Jesus' life followed by a discussion, a monologue, or a dialogue of Jesus. Those two things are tied together. And so therefore, when we approach the text in this new particular way, we can look at the biographical event and the discussion of Jesus and understand that the one is somehow connected to the other. Now, there are exceptions to this, because especially when Jesus performs a miracle, there is no discussion that follows. And when we actually get to looking at the text in detail, we will talk about why that is the case. We're just not going to talk about it right now. And maybe if you made it this far in the video, maybe you'd like to get a head start in looking and reading at the Gospel of John in a new and fresh way. If you would like, I highly recommend that you find online a PDF version of the Gospel of John that is written that doesn't have the chapters and verses written into it. And when you do that, pay careful attention to how the book is structured. And when you do that, you will see that there is a natural flow, and each particular scene concludes with the text telling us that Jesus went from one place to another. If you do this, write a comment so we can start a discussion. Also, I want to let you know that there is a Facebook group that we created for people who would like to discuss some of the ideas that we talk about in these videos. You can find a link to that in the description box below. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, leave a comment, subscribe, hit the notification button. I love you all. I will see you guys all in the next video.